Welcome to a special edition of Undercurrents. We are going to be here all day, all week, covering the inauguration. Here in Washington, the energy is high, even if the wind is also high and the temperatures are low. But we are going to be here, so make sure you subscribe on the channel, wherever you get your podcasts, and over at undercurrents.tv for the full premium experience of the show. Now, one of the most important pledges that Donald Trump campaigned on in 2016, 2020, and 2024 is reining in America's immigration system. And let's just take a listen to what he said about that in part in his inaugural address before we get into a little bit about what he is already doing. White House staff is entering the grounds for the Trump administration, and they are about to take action. So here's Donald Trump in the inaugural address from the Capitol Rotunda.
Under the orders I signed today, we will also be designating the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. And by invoking the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, I will direct our government to use the full and immense power of federal and state law enforcement to eliminate the presence of all foreign gangs and criminal networks, bringing devastating crime to U.S. soil, including our cities and inner cities. As Commander-in-Chief, I have no higher responsibility than to defend our country from threats and invasions, and that is exactly what I am going to do. We will do it at a level that nobody's ever seen before.
Okay, and here is a little bit from a press release that the White House sent out not long ago. They said President Trump will take bold action to secure our border and protect American communities. Part of that, it says President Trump will begin the process of designating cartels, including the dangerous Tren de Aragua, as foreign terrorist organizations and use the Alien Enemies Act to remove them. The armed forces, including the National Guard, will engage in border security, which is national security, and will be deployed to the border to assist existing law enforcement personnel. Trump is suspending refugee resettlement after communities were forced to house large and unsustainable populations of migrants, straining community safety and resources. So there's something very specific in all of this. Again, these are policies that are going into action literally with executive orders being put in front of Donald Trump in a matter of moments. But I want to focus in, and our guest today is somebody who has probably more than almost anyone been putting the intellectual heft into what the immigration policy of the Trump administration will look like. So we're very, very lucky to have just a slice of his time as all of this is transpiring here in Washington, D.C. But that's what Donald Trump said is going to happen. And now I want to ask Joshua Treviño of the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Josh, thank you for being here. Just to tell us a little bit about himself and his reaction to Donald Trump, the announcements that we've seen from Donald Trump today in the last 24 hours. So Josh, welcome. Tell us who you are and give us your initial reaction.
Hello, my name is Joshua Treviño. I am the Chief Transformation Officer at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, where I also work on U.S.-Mexico policy and have advocated for a lot of the changes that President Trump has promised to sign into being as executive orders today on day one of his new presidency. The two big ones to me are the engagement of the Department of Defense at the border and also foreign terror organization designation for Mexican cartels. The engagement of U.S. troops at the border is long overdue. Border security ought to be properly a core mission of the United States Department of Defense. It hasn't been for a variety of political reasons, which really have not stood the test of time. And so what we're seeing now with President Trump is something that is very, very much overdue in the engagement of American forces, actually in the defense of the United States, directly and fully, not just defending borders abroad, but borders at home. And we think that's very, very important.
So tell us about that other item. Tell us about the cartel designation. What does that actually do? It's something you heard about for a long time in conservative circles, sort of in the first Trump administration, but especially after he left office in 2021. Tell us what we can expect, like concretely, to happen after that designation goes into place.
The other major change that the president has made is in designating Mexican cartels as foreign terror organizations. And this is a long overdue measure that is going to enable the federal government of the United States to take really new, tough, and aggressive action against those cartels. You're going to see broader prosecutorial powers be brought to bear that are going to give extraterritorial jurisdiction and enable the jailing and the conviction of a lot of these cartel leaders in ways that are currently not possible. You're also going to see the possibility of material support charges opening up so that anybody rendering any kind of physical support or financial support or anything else to these now designated terror organizations are going to be liable for that. And why that's so terrifically important, especially in the case of Mexico, is that the Mexican cartels actually exist, unfortunately, in synthesis with and in cooperation with, and often with the approval of, the Mexican state itself. Elements of the Mexican government, up to and including the just departed president of Mexico, are known to be allies of and often in the pay of various large cartels in Mexico.
Okay, Josh, and what might that do to migration patterns, not just in the North American hemisphere? Obviously, all of this is happening for the most part through the southern border with Mexico, a little bit from Canada, but we've seen people from all over the world start coming. What could this do to those migration patterns that we've seen really congeal over the last half decade?
Now, the government of Mexico is a heterogeneous entity, so there are good elements and bad, but the bad elements are the ones that are really driving the train when it comes to cartel policy these days. And this foreign terror designation forces those elements to make a choice. They can be with us or with the terrorists, to borrow a phrase. And it's wonderful to see that the Trump administration, literally in its first minutes of power, has shown itself willing and able to bring to bear the full apparatus, the full power, and the full suite of options available to the United States in combating this threat. So, exciting times ahead.
Joshua Treviño, thank you so much for joining us, giving us again a slice of your time on what is an incredibly busy day for you, as somebody has put tons of thought and on a policy level into what could happen from the Trump administration. We'll be following very closely. The country's reaction to this is one of the things I think is most worth paying attention to. The New York Times put out a story yesterday saying that actually Americans like Trump's policy pledges more than they like Donald Trump himself. And one of the things Americans agree on is deporting people who are here illegally. So you can expect to see a lot of media hysteria. And public opinion on immigration has a history of somewhat responding to media hysteria. Not entirely, but somewhat. So when the narrative, which was a false narrative about kids in cages being some type of new policy invented by Donald Trump to torture innocent people, was devised, when we started to see that happening in the first Trump administration, we saw public opinion shift a little bit. I think the media just has less control over the narrative now, so it'll be interesting to see how the country responds to that. Certainly a lot of people in the Beltway press are expecting the country to have a very sort of to find that to be a very morally objectionable and to react in that way. But I'm not sure that that's the case. I'm sure we'll see some images that the media thinks will move the American people, and that definitely offend a lot of people in the press. One of the things you heard in the press release that I just mentioned was the suspension of refugee resettlement. That's something we've seen in New York. We've seen it here in Washington, D.C., places like Boston. We, of course, saw the Martha's Vineyard situation with Ron DeSantis not so long ago. That'll be immediate. I mean, we'll start seeing the effects of that. I mean, Mayor Eric Adams of New York was actually canceled his plans and came to D.C. for the inauguration today. So that'll be an interesting thing to pay attention to. But Josh's insights into what these laws are intended to do by the people who designed them, suggested them, is incredibly helpful. So he's with the Texas Public Policy Foundation. We appreciate him joining the show. We appreciate all of you. Make sure to subscribe here on the YouTube channel, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and over at undercurrents.tv for the full premium experience of the show. We'll see you soon.